Katie, welcome to the Two Fun Guys podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and for anybody that's not watching on video and is only listening, Brent and I are currently restrained fully to our chairs, tied by a Shibari expert, Miss Kati Bird. You're the only one who's free, who has hands available, so anything that needs to be done in here, you'll be our resident hand user.
Yep, hands on deck, ready.
Well, I think the first thing that I'm really curious about now that we're fully restrained is I'm really wondering what the history of Shibari is and how did that start?
Well, you'll be curious to know that, so first to start, it is a Japanese art. Shibari, the word means to tie. Now, if you went to Japan and you said, hey, where can I find Shibari? They're not going to know what you're talking about. It's more underground than that. So the word tie could be like tie your shoe or tie the obi of the kimono, the belt. So originally it started as a martial art, Hojo Jitsu. So samurai would use their martial art techniques in conjunction with a rope, and they would tie captives. And then they would transport them, and they would go to trial. So they tied them in such a way that there was no knots, because a knot would indicate that there was a decision made about the crime. So they would go to trial, and if they were confirmed innocent, then the rope would be pulled, and they would be released, and they would, I imagine, run free. And if they were found guilty, then they would be, imprisoned and live out their sentence. And the interesting thing is that the way that they would tie them would indicate several things. So first, the way that they would tie them would indicate the severity of the crime that they committed. So whether that's with the decoration of the tie or the number of knots would portray that. Secondly, it would also indicate who they were in society, their social hierarchy. So then when they were taken into public places or walked through crowds or whatever, people would see them and be like, oh, so you did that crime?
Like a specific knot would correlate to a crime that they did, basically?
Yeah, essentially. It would maybe reveal the type of crime, whether it was stealing or something like this. It would show what they did or how intense or severe the crime was in relation to the societal standards. Additionally, they would tie them in such a way. So first off, that in itself of knowing what you did and who you are and being exposed is humiliating, right? But additionally, they would tie them in certain ways that would also provoke shame. So in Japan, exposing the underarms is considered shameful. So some of the ties, the arms go up and expose the armpits. So it's that third level of exposure and provoking this emotion.
Thank you for tying us with our arms down. So we're not exposed and embarrassed.
Yeah. So that's the origins, Hojo Jitsu. That's where it all started.
And so the word Shibari just means to tie. So you would say, like, I'm going to Shibari my shoes. Was that
in Japanese,
yes.
Yeah,
in Japanglish.
Yes.
You would mix them together.
Yeah, in Japanglish.
Okay, interesting. And then how did you find Shibari?
So I had a partner who started exploring it after we had dated and was telling me about it. And to be honest, I was completely repulsed. I was terrified. I had no interest whatsoever. I was like, that's a sexual thing that I'm not interested. That's violence on women. It's just for their pleasure, not mine. I have to be naked. Like everything about it just felt really contracting to me. And then later in life, I stumbled into a workshop, and it was an interesting point in my life then. I was about 2 years into a pretty radical experience in my own life path where everything I had known to a certain point had changed. So for instance, just to give a little brief story, at that point, living as a heterosexual woman in a regular life as I had known it, with my regular experiences as I had known it, literally from one day to the next, my whole world kind of shifted. And I woke up one day and all of a sudden I was repulsed by all men, scared of all of them, like afraid to be near them, their smell, their voice, everything was just really contracting to me.
Did something change? Like an event happened?
It kind of was like two small things that had happened, nothing really big or monumental, but two small things that came together and caused this unveiling. And I had known that I had had certain experiences, but there was something that just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. Nothing so big, But what I started to understand was that, oh my gosh, like I can't move this direction anymore. And it was kind of scary to me. Like I've dated men my whole life. Like what? But then this understanding of all these things around like obligations or just past trauma or the ways that I had been interacting in a way that wasn't self-honoring. So I kind of honored my body and I was like, okay. But I'd also had an attraction to women that I decided to honor because what else was I going to do? I wasn't going to just like cut everything off. So I started looking that way. So I say that just because about 2 years later, I discovered Shibari. And to me, it was a very pivotal and big experience in understanding my relationships and interacting in intimacy with others. So I stumbled into this workshop and it was like, oh, it's Shibari. And I was like, okay, don't really know, but I have a background in rock climbing and rappelling and outdoor skills. And I'm very familiar with the ropes.
You've been tying knots.
I've been tying knots for a very
pro.
long time. So I felt very comfortable and I was excited for that component. But what I discovered was so much more than just the technicality of the tying, which I was really excited about. And that's where my focus was. But working with a partner and also seeing like, okay, we're in close proximity, we're touching, also like my fears and my desires and also their touch and like how am I interpreting all this, all of it became very loud and vibrant in my being and started just understand like the depth of which these ropes can take us. So that was my little introduction.
Yeah, that's cool.
So you got tied up in the workshop?
Yeah, we exchanged. So I received the rope on my body and then I tied them. And wow, completely different experiences, as you're probably feeling into now a little bit. But tying the person, they're allowing me to touch their body and to manipulate their body in a certain way and apply the rope on them very close because I'm putting rope on their body. It's like I'm dressing them, you know, I'm putting clothes on them essentially. And then they can't move. So then I'm in control. I'm in charge. I'm making decisions. If they want something done or they want to feel something, I'm doing it. So it starts to just like highlight this more like masculine energetic, not masculine gender, but like this decision maker, this leader, this guide, this artist role. And then I started to feel into my own power. And then I had some excitement around that and some fear around that. And also like, who am I? Am I hurting this person? Like who, like some kind of questions around identity. And then when I received the rope, it was also like, oh, okay, they're close. Now I can't move. Now I feel them close to me. And just awareness to like someone else's touch on my body, their proximity. Also, conversations started going in my mind, like whether I liked it or I didn't. Like, so there was a situation within that, it was a 3-day workshop. And there was a person that tied me that I didn't like their touch and I didn't feel safe. And then my mind starts going and I'm like, I don't like this anymore. I want this to stop. I want them to move away. But I wasn't speaking. And so then it became very aware. It's like, oh, wow, like I have a struggle in this department. So all of my social, like communication skills around my voice. So then I started to see my struggles in the feminine of like, wow, I'm struggling to surrender because I'm feeling contracted. And also I'm not vocalizing that. Like, why? And that freeze response. So then I was really starting to understand trauma responses. And that was coming alive. So then I started to understand, like, from receiving the rope and also giving the rope, these two huge parts of being a human, this masculine energetic and this feminine energetic that exists within everyone in different levels, and how I was relating to both of them in my life at that point. Yeah.
Is that part of the workshop, is to expose those things, or how do they present it to you?
So in this workshop that I attended, I was really grateful because the focus was on the human connection. It was on the technicality also, but it was also on how to speak to this person, like boundaries, desires, also giving touch in different sorts of ways, also aftercare. So it was very holistic, and I appreciated that awareness that we're human beings and we have traumas and we have past stories and we have fears and we have desires, and how to talk about those in that space, which has been something that I've continued to expand upon since that workshop and discover more and more within that.
How long ago was that workshop?
This was almost 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where did that lead you next?
Well, I just couldn't stop playing with the ropes.
Yeah.
I became the first person that I was working with in that workshop was a man, and I felt very safe with his energy, with his presence. And there wasn't anything sexual between us. It was very platonic, but we played with emotion. And he had had a previous experience with the ropes with his partner that was quite traumatic. And so like, we just kind of were very sensitive beings. And so we'd meet up for these sessions. And we'd sit and we'd talk and we'd say, okay, what's alive for you right now? And he'd be like, oh, I'm really frustrated. I have this anger and I just really want you to tie me up and I just want to fight. And I'd be like, okay. So that's what we would do. We'd get into the ropes, tie, and he would just like emote and fight and resist. And then I'd untie him and then we'd hold space. So it became like this cathartic emotional exploration while also simultaneously learning the technical. And so I kept on stepping into these spaces with him, and then he'd tie me in the same thing. And I would start feeling maybe something unexpected. Like maybe I wanted to go really intense, but then I feel really soft and I would just start crying. And so then we'd be present for that. Because it's unpredictable what will show up in that space. So that was the beginning of the journey. And I just kept tying and tying and tying. And then I wanted to learn about suspension. And because, I was a rock climber, I love being high up. So I'm like, come on, let's go. And I also wanted to explore that and that intensity. And so I met someone who could suspend me so I could have that experience. But what was really illuminating about that was it was risky because first off, I had shared, I felt very uncomfortable around men, and this man was wanting me and I was not wanting him. So then it was like, okay, I need to be very, very, very explicit about my boundaries. And no one was really teaching me boundaries, so I had to figure it out. And so we had like a 2-hour conversation around boundaries, and I just broke down every single topic I could think of, just so he knew what I would and wouldn't want to experience. Because once you're tied, you're tied. And also it can be altering. It's an altering experience, because when I was first tied in that workshop, when I received the ropes, I got so high from the experience, I couldn't speak for 2 hours and I couldn't leave that person's house because I was floating off into the distance. And so I knew that I was probably going to be altered and I wanted to take care of myself. So going into the rope experience with this man, I really got very, very, very articulate about how I want to experience the ropes, what kind of touch I wanted. I didn't want his hands on my body. He could use the ropes on my body, but not his hands. I didn't want his breath on me. I didn't want anything sexual. I was interested in pain play. So I vocalized all that, and then we went into it. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, he had honored everything. And I was like, wow, what a gift. Like, thank you for listening to everything. And what I noticed from there was like, once all of my desires and boundaries are honored, I feel safe. And therefore, like, I actually want to push some edges a little bit. Like next time, hey, I'm interested in with some touch. Like you can squeeze, but I still don't want anything sexual. And I'm interested in more pain play and this. And so we went into that. And so it just became this development of how safety can move the boundary. And not that it has to, but it was for me. I was like feeling more safe to, okay, well, let's go here, because I knew that he would listen because we were building trust. And there was a moment of miscommunication. And then we stopped playing because I needed some time for myself to heal and to reflect. But still, those sessions that we had together were so pivotal in my understanding of the importance of articulating boundaries. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What type of healing do you see with your clients when you're practicing with them?
Well, a lot of the things that come through are around communication. And you have an itch?
You got an itch, but I got it. Yeah. I would ask for it, but this is a very easy thing to do.
Okay.
Easy scratch.
Sure. So communication. Mm-hmm. So are you able to express, even in the talk before the ropes even happen, it starts before the session of like, what are your desires? I don't know. Okay, well, let's discover that. What are your needs whenever you're feeling uncomfortable, or what helps you feel safe, or what are your boundaries? Like many people don't know. So then it begins the work of talking about that and discovering those things. So that in itself is healing because it's re-empowering to those components. And the ropes have a very special way of, because they're on the body, creating this compression. There's many things that can happen. So in this comfortable tie that you're in, it's kind of like a hug. So maybe you're just getting some oxytocin, just feeling relaxed, cared for, nurtured, just from the compression alone. And sometimes going into the ropes, people haven't had that experience of feeling held because they're so used to holding other people or supporting other people, or they have a hard time asking to be held themselves, to even vocalize that, like, hey, will you hold me? Like, will you take care of me? Like, most people haven't experienced this since they were children. And even in partnerships, sometimes they maybe pretend or think that they're being held, but they're still holding themselves. So the healing part can just be gaining access to these parts that haven't been tended to. Also, around sensation. So experiencing different sensations on the body. So being tied and being in this way, your sensations are enhanced. So if I give you a scratch or a squeeze or a caress, it's going to feel intensified. So bringing awareness back into the body itself, getting out of the mind and feeling the body. And whenever the sensations are unpredictable or more intense, you drop out of here and you're focusing on your body, which most of us are living up here and we forget about our body completely. But the ropes bring you into the body because sometimes the position or the whatever, you have to breathe and focus and be like, okay, I'm feeling excited. And so like that energy is going in me, or maybe I'm feeling nervous, or maybe like whatever, just things are moving in the body. And so you're focusing on that. Additionally, memories can come up. That's always a kind of surprising mystery to it, is memories people don't even know they're there. I had a session with a woman. Have you been tied before? No, never. Why are you interested? I don't know. I just saw it and I felt really, really drawn to it. Amazing. And she was very excited. We got into the session. Everything was moving beautifully. And like halfway through the session, she just got this huge smile and she didn't stop smiling. And at the end, I asked her, like, how was it for you? And she's like, wow, it was remarkable. And also, I remember that 20 years ago, I was taken hostage and tied and thrown in the back of a car. And I was like, wait, what?
What?
How can you forget?
She forgot that.
How can you forget this? How can you forget this? And she did. It completely was gone in her mind. She came into the ropes, was getting tied, and then something like triggered it. And she was like, oh my gosh, she was there. But the thing that happened was, it was like a similar situation. Yeah, ropes on the body, tied, held captive. Not really, but by choice. But at the same time, nurturing presence, care, love, support. And somatically in her body in that moment, she was able to shift those pieces around and she moved into such gratitude for that moment and being safe, and this moment for being back in that space and like feeling just love and support in a totally different context.
Yeah, it's like recalling the trauma, but in a safe, supportive place where you can then work on it instead of just being like re-triggered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like with the presence of another, like how many times have you experienced something painful, hard, challenging, and you're by yourself and you're like in your room or you're in your car or you're wherever and you're processing alone. But in this space, like, and with ropes, like I'm there because I'm caring for you. Like I won't leave the room with you two tied. It doesn't feel safe to me and it's not safe for you, even though you're safe. Like I'm not really concerned, but I wouldn't leave the space. Same within a session. I won't leave. I stay present. So no matter what's happening, what emotion's coming up, what thing they're moving through, I'm there and I'm witnessing them. Number one. Number two, and I ask questions, where are you? What's happening? And they tell this story. They're in another world sometimes. I'm here. I'm a child. I'm in the hospital and there's these tubes up my nose and I'm tied down. Okay. What do you need? How can I support you? I need you to take this, this, and this off. So they gain authority back. They're able to use their voice. I make the actions. We make the actions together. And then the recording changes because they do the action they weren't able to do, or they say the thing they weren't able to say, or they receive the love and support they never received in that story. So in those scary moments where they're not feeling safe, but they're receiving a hug or tenderness or like, you're okay, or support, this calming happens to them. And it's like a rewiring.
Brent, how do you feel now that you've been tied for about 20-ish minutes?
I feel pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't.
Anything else than good? Man of many words, this guy.
No, I just feel good. I don't feel stressed. I feel relaxed. Feels chill. It's like a heavy blanket, I guess.
Yeah.
Vibe.
Yeah. I notice, well, I'm curious, is there anything coming up for you that you notice other than you just feel chill? I notice a lot of itch. Like like my body wants to, I don't care about being released. Like I feel good. It feels good, but it's like a subconscious wanting to be released in the way that like my face is itchy or my neck itches. It's like, oh, I need my hands to do stuff, but I am. I'm stuck.
Hands are tied to the chair.
Hands are tied to the chair. So yeah, that's interesting. It's sort of like a meditative practice of either asking for it if you really need it, but then you have to delineate between how badly do you need it. Like, is it just an itch that you'll scratch that will come back up again? If that's the case, then like just accept it. Accept that you're itchy and then you don't need to fix it.
Yeah.
Or if it's like a real problem, then you ask for it.
Sure.
Right?
But also, why not ask like, hey, can you just touch my face and move my hair around? And like why not? Like, even if it's not a big issue, like, why not ask?
You're going to be coming over here every 3 minutes. to scratch my eyebrow. So it's going to get real annoying real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is interesting. And I see the allure from like you said, when you're always on and you're always holding space. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of like a masculine thing as well, that probably a lot of men could benefit from some shibari. Mm-hmm. Even when you're relaxing, there's this air of like trying to hold space for someone else, or always being on, or always having to lead. So this, it does force you into a position of just like acceptance and surrendering.
True. And in a session, I wouldn't typically just tie you and sit there and look at you and talk to you. Like it would be.
This is a little unorthodox.
This is very unorthodox. It would be a lot more dynamic. Mm. I would start to move your body. Maybe I would add more pressure. Maybe I would take away some sensations, maybe blindfold or add smells or change the positioning and just create some unpredictability. So you're dropping out of the mind, and the tying and untying and tying and untying becomes like a meditation, and you're losing track of what's happening, and you're really just kind of going into another space. And also what a lot of people experience too is a shift that happens when the ropes come off. That's actually when the biggest shift happens. And body relaxation is when the tension is released. So when you're untied is when you will notice a shift happening. Mm-hmm.
What do you tend to see with people when they get untied?
I mean, actually, some people go to another space. Like it seems like they're sleeping and they don't even realize they've been untied. They still think they're tied because they're so deeply relaxed in their body. It seems like a dream space that they kind of go into, almost like they're sleeping, but yeah, deeply, deeply relaxed. You can see it in the way that they move their body. Their eyes can be a little bit heavier, like just really a deep relaxation. Some people say that it feels more relaxing than a massage. Mm-hmm.
How do you organize your workshops? Like if we were to go through one of your workshops, how does that go?
So I like to emphasize, of course, the technicality, like how to tie safely, and teaching technical skills to bind the body. That's obviously one thing that's present. But more than that, I like to talk about the partner dynamic. So two friends, lovers, strangers, whatever, it's like they're about to initiate in something and just really dropping in, like, how do you feel right now? Like if you two were going to tie each other, maybe you would feel like some contraction, some uncertainty, excitement, whatever. Or like, hey, what does this say about us? What does this mean about us? Like, so those questions will start to come up. So we start to talk about that. And also checking in with each other. So teaching like, hey, can you vocalize when you feel uncomfortable or not comfortable? And bringing that to the table. Also, so this is kind of like the first day kind of stuff going into it, but also like just in the tying itself. So if I'm teaching you how to tie Tony, but Tony's like, no, do it like this, do it like this, do it like that, do it like that. Tony is taking charge when you're trying to take charge. So just then is speaking like, okay, if you have the ropes in your hand, you're embodying the energetic of the masculine, you're receiving the ropes. So like embodying the energetic of the feminine. Mm-hmm. How can you start to surrender? And yes, of course, if the rope is pinching you or it's too tight, vocalize. But can you relax the need to control how he's tying you and let him figure it out?
I trust you, Brett.
I trust you too.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah.
So that would be some of the day one kind of stuff. And then also teaching technicalities. And then also...
Do you see more women than men show up to your workshops or these kinds of workshops for Shibari?
It's a mix of both.
It's a mix.
Yeah, it's a mix. And what I think is unique about the spaces I host is I allow individuals to sign up rather than just couples. So people who are solo sign up and then they connect with someone completely new in the class. And that can be quite vulnerable for people and very activating and also really unique. And so what ends up happening in the space is I really emphasize a really deep communication component that allows us to really articulate what our boundaries are. And I have an acronym that I use that I allow people to break down like what types of touch they are or are not open to, what type of energetic, sensual, sexual are they open to, and like breaking it down. What type of pain are they interested in experiencing, any sort of intensity, and where and what would that look like? Also a check-in system. How can I read you and see that you're understanding or not understanding, that you're enjoying? Or what will your face look like if you're not enjoying? Also, do you feel comfortable vocalizing if you're not? And so we create a huge system and then we go into the play together. And what I see is like many emotions come up. First off, like In couple dynamics, maybe they discover like, oh, actually my needs are not getting met, or that's exactly what I needed. Or I notice with a lot of men who receive in their partnerships or their dynamics, like, wow, I've never been held before, or I haven't been held ever, or not since I was a kid. And tears, many, many tears happens. And that happens right from the beginning in some of these sessions that we're doing. Feeling a sense of safety can be quite emotional for people, where they actually feel like they're receiving what they wanted to receive. Also, it can be quite groundbreaking for people to do this play and be like, wow, I thought that ropes were only sexual, and this wasn't sexual, but it was orgasmic. Like, I had this interaction with this stranger. We had this play session, and I feel so fulfilled, and there wasn't anything sexual, and we don't know each other. So that to me is quite potent. Is just like, how can we create more human relating situations where we're playing and enjoying and connecting? And it doesn't have to be sexual, or it can. There's nothing wrong with sexuality in the space, but it's also nice to share connections with people and not go there, and also experience so much pleasure and sensation in play.
Can you break down the communication acronym? Like, give our listeners an idea of how to build good communication with their own partner or friends?
Yeah. So the acronym is IISSPP. So the first I is intention. Why are you here? What do you want to do? So intention. So maybe if you and I were showing up to a play date, I call them play dates. I like seeing how your eyes look like they're softening.
Yeah, I'm pretty sleepy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sleepy
and Brent's
too.
voice, I notice your voice is like real.
Yeah, I'm real relaxed.
Low.
I can
Lower
see
than
it in
usual.
the eyes. Both your eyelids are a little bit heavier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I got no juice.
I could go to sleep right now. Yeah.
Just mentioning that.
Quick podcast nap, everybody.
Yeah. So intention. So what if we show up to a play date and I'm like, have this vision of like being tied to this tree with like this fabric and taking these gorgeous pictures because I really want to post on social media. But you are like, wow, I'm just really looking to connect with my partner. I'm looking for really soft and sensual and like nothing really too organized. We show up, but we don't talk about it. And we just get into it. Neither of us are going to be satisfied because I'm going to be like, no, I want this to be pretty for this picture. And you're going to be like, I don't want a picture. I just want to connect with you. So intention is really important. So getting on the same page with intention. Maybe someone wants to do power play, or someone wants to play with intensity or acrobatics or sensuality or sexuality, or someone wants to practice technical skills. So what is the intention? Number one. 2, injury. Pretty basic, but where on your body is safe or not safe to tie? I have this shoulder injury, so putting my arm behind my back doesn't feel good. Or I actually don't like rope around my neck. It's not an injury, but it's a preference and a huge boundary. Don't have rope on my neck. Or it's a place where an injury, I'm like, when you're hurt and you don't want that hurt. So if it's a place where I say, if you know for sure you don't want something, say it there. I don't want a blindfold. I don't want rope in my mouth. I don't want my clothes taken off. I don't want anything sexual. It's a place where you put your explicits, like, this is my no zone. Just like if you're injured, you're like, don't hurt me more, Does that make sense? So IIS, the first S is sensual. So adhering to like the types of touch you are or are not open to. So do you like soft, gentle touch, squeezing, pressing, pushing? Do you want hands on your body? Do you not want hands on your body? If so, what does that look like? I also like to break it down into like archetypes, because I can say, yeah, I like this really gentle touch. Okay. So what if this is the touch of a lover versus the touch of a mother? They're 2 different types of touches. Mm-hmm. So articulating that, like, I'm into like this more sensual arousing, or I'm into nurturing calm of a mother. It's also an energetic presence that would bring also. Mm-hmm. So sensual, what kind of touch are you open to or not open to? The next category would be sexual. So are we doing, can I say this stuff on here?
Oh, say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay. Sexual. So what kind of, so is there going to be sexual activity? Or what kind of sexual activity? Be explicit, because it's really important. And this is something you can learn in the BDSM scene if you play or dabble in that. You make the agreements before you enter the space. You don't just figure it out as you go. You say everything before you play, because there's an awareness that you become altered in the space. It's like taking drugs. So you talk about everything before, so that when you're in the space, you know where you can go. So you talk about in the beginning, are we having sex? What kind of sex? What this? And you talk about what's on the table and also what's not on the table. And then when you're in the play, you can take those things away for sure, but you don't add. Like if I say no kissing and then I'm getting tied and I'm like, oh, please just kiss me. It's a no zone. It's a no-go. So sexual activities. Also, I think about like parts of the body. So the mouth, the chest, the genitals, the booty. Those are zones. Do you want rope there? Do you want touch there? Also energetic. So sexual energy. So you can say like, I don't want anything sexual. I don't want my mouth. I don't want to be kissed. I don't want my chest, nothing. But the person's like, okay, I won't do that. We're not doing anything sexual. I won't touch those places. But I'm going to show up and I'm going to be bringing this sexual energy. It feels just as violating. So like, is that allowed in the space? And if yes, play with that. Maybe it's fun to play with that eros of that like desire, but not doing anything with it. It can be quite activating. But if you don't want it, it can be quite contracting. Yeah. And then the next letter is P. I say it and then I kind of take it away, but I say pain and then I retract and I say intensity. So intensity could be like the tight binding of the body, like seminawa is the word for that, like really tight, kind of torturous predicament play, adding intensity, a little bit of suffering maybe. Maybe you want to feel intensity and feel uncomfortable. Also, it could be adding other BDSM sort of things. So like spanking, biting, flogging. You can just, in that category, it's like add the extra stuff, hair pulling, add other play in there if you're interested. And the last P would be power play. Are you interested in playing with power dynamics? Many people assume because there is a power dynamic naturally happening because it's like, I'm tying you, you're losing power, but it can be more sensation and more equal. But do you want to play with power dynamics fully and making that a choice? And if so, that's another conversation box to open. What does that look like? What kind of names, what kind of roles, what kind of places do we want to go? Becomes another box to open. So that's like, it's pretty comprehensive, but when these people have these conversations, you put it all out there. And people don't have these conversations. So to me, it's a really powerful tool, not just for ropes, but for intimacy in general, for relating with others.
Yeah, no one learns any of these things. And then everyone's misfiring on what people want and desire. No one's taught any of this basic stuff. Okay, so you learn all these, how to set boundaries, how to communicate. So then what is next? Do a simple tie, and then how does it unfold, the workshop?
So, yeah, in the workshop. So the way that I like to structure with this conversation is I like to then lead people into a session, like a play space, a guided play space, where they take the technical skills that they've learned and they utilize them, but they also drop into the play. To me, play isn't focusing on the technical skills. It's like dance class. Like if you go to a dance class, they have the class before and then the social. So the dance class, you learn all the technicalities and you practice that. And then the social, you're supposed to just enjoy. Yes, think about those things, but also let it go and play and dance and mess up and just keep going and have a good time. But if in the social, you're just focusing on the technicalities, your partner is going to not drop out, but step out of the dance. They're not going to hear the music. They're not going to feel the beat. They're going to be focusing on you learning. So the social is for playing. So same thing with this is we open up the social for all that. And then we go into the dance, the social dance, and playing with energetics of touch and movement. And I guide people through a journey of different ways they can interact with the person. I give many, many ideas of how they can be closer or further or add pressure or tie without touching. All of these concepts and just bringing many, many ideas. And based on the boundaries that they've chosen with their partners, they can take those ideas or they can leave them. But I really empower them to honor their partner. So if their partner says like, don't do anything really tight, and then I'm guiding them like, okay, now I'll do tight tying. I empower them to not listen to me. Like only honor what works for you and your partnership. I'm going to give you many ideas. If it lands, take it. And if it doesn't, don't do it. And just create this space for them to play and to connect. And it takes people to other worlds, other dimensions. Like they come out of it and they're just like, whoa, I haven't experienced anything like that before. And the tying and the untying and the sensation of the rope, it just becomes so wild. Such a dance and meditation.
And you said there's these different subcategories of shibari, like the one Japanese word that means impact. What was that word?
Impact.
Or intensity.
So there is a type of tying called seminawa.
Seminawa, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the other types of tying?
So another type would be, which I love, is called ichinawa, which means one rope.
I'm itchy right now.
That wasn't that funny, but it's funny.
It was funny to you.
It was funny to me because you were talking about how itchy your face is.
Exactly.
Ichinawa or ipanawa is tying with one rope. And this is something I teach often, and it's what I do often because I love what we can create. Like there's no goal. Like there isn't, like I kind of tied you guys into like a particular harness, but with ichinawa, it doesn't look like anything. It's about the sensation. It's about the mood. It's about how I put the rope on your body. Doesn't matter how it looks. Aesthetically, it won't look good, but the person will feel something, and that's important. So playing with mood and emotion. And then there's, floor work. I don't know the word in Japanese for floor work, but tying on the floor. And then there's suspension. Those are kind of the main styles I can think of. But yeah, within that, torture, pleasure, sex, like all the same kind of categories.
Do you recommend people listening, they're like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Should they just go ahead and tie each other up? Or is that a big no-no?
I recommend learning from a practitioner. Ropes are dangerous, to be honest. Like just like riding a motorcycle, you wouldn't say like, I just listened to this amazing motorcycle podcast. I just bought a motorcycle and I'm going out. No, you're putting yourself in huge danger. And ropes are dangerous and things can go wrong. Just like riding a motorcycle, you can be the best rider and you can still get hurt. And that's just part of the risk that you take because you enjoy the ride. And same with the ropes. We enjoy the risk. We enjoy the edge and we play with the edges and we do so safely. And yes, things sometimes are going to go wrong. And mostly with ropes, things that can go wrong, a lot of it's emotional and spiritual, actually, and mental. It's like something goes, like you have this idea of how something's going to go, and then it goes off and you don't hold space for each other. And it can be very emotionally damaging and can create maybe a trauma in that space. There's also physical risks because of your nerves and blood restriction, joints. There's things to be aware of there. So yeah, I highly recommend learning with a trained professional before you just start tying someone. Absolutely.
And so you've traveled quite a bit, both teaching and learning Shibari. Where have you gone?
Thailand was where I started. Okay. And I have a master there that I work with, and she's amazing.
Can you give her a shout out or?
Yeah. Tatiana Lamadi.
Okay.
She's Ukrainian.
What part of Thailand?
Copenhagen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And she's been very influential in my journey, mostly because of how she plays with emotion and mood with the ropes. It's so inspiring. And she's also a performer, but more than just performance, she's not just tying, she's creating a story and she's creating a mood, and it's a lot of it's improv, and I appreciate improv a lot. And then, so Thailand, I've also been to Berlin. I attended EURIX last year.
What's that?
European Riggers Convention. Rigger. So it's a word for the person who ties. It's a word.
Oh, okay.
One of the words for the person who ties. And a lot of the European influenced teachers are there. And there was about 300 people and workshops all day. And it was extraordinary. But a completely different energetic around the ropes. And then I've been here in the U.S. I haven't learned with anyone in the U.S. I went to Japan and learned with Ren Yagami, Japanese master, in his studio in Shinjuku.
Does he have a particular style?
Ren Yagami style. His style.
Okay. His style. He's
his style.
He's the Henzo Gracie of Shibari.
Does he? It sounds like you can have many different philosophies with tying people up, right?
Totally.
You can have different outcomes and different experiences.
Yeah. And my values is I like to learn from a lot of different teachers because I have different intentions and desires with the ropes, when some people just study with one master and only do their style, which is, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah. How would you describe his?
His style. Well, so he has a martial arts background. And what I appreciate about him is how he manipulates and moves the body with such ease and grace is very beautiful and very aesthetic. And I mean, when I was working with him, it felt like he was a magician. Like how he was articulating and moving the body with such ease. It was incredible. And he also plays with emotion. So he's playing with eye contact. He's looking at you. He's taunting you a little bit. Like he's very expressive with his face. And so he'll be tying and he'll look between your legs and you're just kind of like, what are you doing? And he's just like staring and you're like starting to feel like, oh my gosh. So he's provoking emotion. And aesthetics. He ties very aesthetically beautiful ties. I think also for him, it was, you know, when we talked about healing for Shibari, I will mention that not everyone has that perspective. I would say that most people don't have that perspective. There's, as I mentioned before, with all the intentions, there's, artistic or technical, sadomasochist, power play. There's many different reasons why people play with the ropes. Healing is a very small subsect of all of this. So, for instance, for him, he's like, healing with the ropes, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He's like, ropes are for sex. For him. So that his attraction to the ropes is the erotic, is the sexual. Mm-hmm. He ties for that in that way. Yeah.
Have you noticed differences since you've traveled around the world in the US, different cultures having a different approach or responding differently to Shibari and to the art form or to being restrained? Or is it pretty universal how humans react?
I mean, everyone's a human. Everyone has a body. There's a lot of similarity, actually. I think that, and most people have some preconceived ideas around sex and intimacy already across the board. So that's pretty universal. Just what those things are may differ slightly. But yeah, I think there's a lot of similarity between worldwide with it. But maybe different types of shame. For instance, like in Japan, because of the way the infrastructure is in society, like how they play with and how they're supposed to present themselves every single day as perfect and all these things, and emotions are not acceptable for expressing, like, yeah. So they whenever they're tied in this underground space, like they experience the ropes much differently. Maybe they experience nudity or exposure differently. But in the US, we're like, yeah, my armpits, sure. Tops off, sure. No problem. Like maybe those things aren't provocative or bothersome to us because we have different cultural or backgrounds with that. Yeah.
Do you have workshops where you teach suspension as well? Or is that pretty advanced?
It is more advanced, and I do teach it. It's something that it's not my preference to teach it. I will do it. But for me, what I really value is the connective stuff. So working on communication, intimacy, holding space for one another, playing, all of those things, there's so much that can be learned on the ground. And suspension, it just takes a whole different level of attention and care, because you're really focusing on the ropes. Like you really have to put more attention towards managing the person's safety because it's a lot more intense in suspension.
Yeah, I bet. How do you feel like learning Shibari through the last 4 years has changed your, quality of relationships, intimately or just friendships? Like, what have you learned that you now apply in your own friendships, other than just like the boundaries and sharing intentions? Because you hated men for a while, right?
Yeah. So
Inversion,
and that was part of my process is like learning how to re-identify with my sexuality and how to feel safe. That's like a big lesson that it's like how to feel safe in the world was what I was learning. And what are my boundaries and what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and how to vocalize that and to ask for what I want and what I need. And also, if I don't feel safe, don't keep moving forward. Take a step back. Maybe this person isn't the one to connect with. So what have I learned? The power of communication and intimacy. And I think because in my work, like I'm asking people these questions because we're going into an intimate space. I'm going to ask all these questions and they answer them. And then when I step into relating with another intimately, I ask these questions and they're like, oh, wow, I've never talked about this in this way before. And they're like, oh, this is new. So I kind of just like, to me, it overlaps into my intimacy and also play spaces. I just recognize the value in play. And I kind of have this idea that like everyone is available to play with. I just decide what that looks like. So maybe I don't want to be like, I don't know, I can just pick like whatever. We meet each other and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't see anything sexual, but like I would love to wrestle. I would love to dance. I would love to play with hair pulling. Maybe I'd love to play with this or that. And then I can kind of see like where we want to play. And I suggest those things to you. And ultimately people just want to connect. So if you share what you do want and you're like, yeah, actually, that sounds fun. Let's do that. And then in the end, we both feel satisfied because we both had a connection. But maybe there are other desires. And you're like, actually, I really enjoyed that. And I would like to add this, this, and this. And then I can feel into that. And if it's what I do or don't want to explore. But what I love about the work that I'm doing is I feel like it's created so much more playfulness in ways like with the body, with intimacy, but not necessarily sexuality, which I think is something that's highlighted within the BDSM community is like, they just play. They love sensation. They like to play with their bodies. They love to feel. And they create scenarios of which they can do that. And a lot of them aren't sexual. And then some of them are. It doesn't really, everyone's different. Yeah, so I think that's one of my main takeaways with Shibari. Yeah.
Awesome.
If you could go back and have a conversation with yourself as you were starting Shibari, is there anything that you would want to share, or what would you want early Kati to know?
Wow, those are the best times. The beginning was the best. Oh my gosh.
Why is that?
I was flying high all the time from the experiences. Like I also, so as I mentioned before, and you guys are being impacted now, I see it in the face, but like it can really put you in a whole different state of being. So the person receiving the rope is becoming quite altered, and me, the one giving the rope, I'm also sensing them. I'm also like very empathic, but besides that, like if the further they're dropping in, the more I'm dropping in as well. So untying them, I'm also high and I'm also altered.
Mm-hmm.
So I go through the rest of the day kind of floating also. And so in the beginning, I was enjoying so much, like just the exploration, like how I got so dedicated to learning that I booked a model every single day. I dedicated for the first, like when I started learning suspension, I committed to, it was 4 months for sure. It went longer than that, but for 4 months, I said every single day, no matter what, you will do 3 to 5 hours of suspension training or rope training, no matter what. So that model cancels, I get another one. That model cancels, I tie myself. Or I watch videos and I study. I learned a lot on my own in the beginning, learning online, which made sense to me at the time because I had a rope background and understanding. But then I also knew the importance of working with a master in person. And I also did that when that became available. It was, during COVID times, I didn't have that accessibility. I was on a small island. I did what I could. But each person that came to me, we would sit, I'd do an emotional check-in. How are you feeling today? What's alive for you? They would share, okay, what are you curious to explore in the ropes today? They would share, and different people had different intentions. One person wanted something creative. One person wanted to test their flexibility. One person wanted something more erotic. This person wanted to fight me, whatever. We'd bring it into the space and we'd go into the space and we'd go for it. And then at the end, we'd sit, talk, decompress, share what worked, what didn't work, how they felt. Every time was like that. And so it really just created a lot of variety in my experiences and reaching a lot of different sides of people and experiences.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It wasn't, sometimes I had just technical days, but it was like maybe like 20 minutes of technical and the other just like going into an experience together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, it makes you want to sleep for sure.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Quite sleepy.
It's hard to keep going.
Yeah.
Well, Kati, where can people find you? How can they learn more about Shibari, or if they wanted to learn from you, how would they do that?
Yeah. So you can find me, my website is shibariunraveled.com. Also on Instagram, becoming_unraveled. At the moment, I'm traveling quite a bit. So you can find me in the US, usually around in the West, so Salt Lake area. I'm also here in Austin at the moment. I can also be found in Asheville, North Carolina. I will be in Costa Rica for the spring. I also go to Thailand. So pretty much just find me on social media and see where I am if I'm touring through your town or your area. At the moment, I don't have any online offerings, but that is coming soon. And yeah, I'd love to do one-on-one sessions where I tie. I also do couples sessions where a couple comes into the space and we play with technicalities, but we also just play with how to mix the energy, how to play, how to create emotion, sensation, take a journey together. Also, you can invite me to teach workshops or into retreats, anything like this. I travel, so I'm available.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming and for tying us up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kati.
Making us feel relaxed
You're welcome.
and surrendered.
My pleasure.